an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Cradle Book 7, Uncrowned, Chapters 11, 12, and 13. In these chapters, Lindon comes in 10th. And I thought that he was getting this like rad fortress because he was in the top 10. But it turns out it seems giving one to everybody who passed at all. And if this is the prize for just passing the first round, what the fuck are the other prizes? Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Andy for commissioning this episode. I'm going to put it out there because I am a selfish girl who wants to do only the things that she wants to do. But since we're going to have been caught up on the series by middle of January, I will be finished covering the most recent book that just came out. I was wondering if anybody out there would be interested in commissioning any of the other Will White books, because now I'm just like a big fan of Will White and I would like to read his other stuff. And if nobody is interested, that's fine. I will literally just fucking mainline them on my own time. But I thought I would put it out there before we get started because I'm just having such a good time. And I was listening along to Black Flame the other day with Owen, who is currently in the middle of that book. And I can't believe how re-listenable these books are and how many tiny little details get thrown out that are just sort of like, they're not treated as a big deal in the moment. And even if they were, it wouldn't really register because you don't have context for anything. But re-listening, you're like, oh my God, he talked about it there. Oh my God, he mentioned that so early. Like, just that kept happening over and over and over again. And really the main takeaway for me re-listening was Jailong mentions a valley protected by a curse. And I don't think I remembered or necessarily like really retained that was the rumor going around, but I have to assume that Sacred Valley because of the power being like leached away somehow. I want to know. So anyway, this author has low-key like got me. He's got me in his clutches, and I'm just sort of just letting it happen. We just can't fight it at this point. So, okay, Jacob Online says when Traveler's Gate hits, and he's got the eyeball emojis. Is that the next book in this series, or is that a different thing? And Chris says, can't wait for your reaction to Winter Spring, best book so far. I thought it was Winter Steel. Do I have it wrong? Traveler's Gate was Will's first series. Oh. Chris says, whoop. Oh, shit. I'm out here correcting y'all. I am incorrigible. Forgive me. So yeah, these chapters, I kind of get what I was like expecting from last episode where I was telling you guys that I kind of thought it was going to be like a Hunger Games, just throw everybody into a fucking field and be like, see who gets there first. And that's almost exactly what this one is. Everyone's sort of talking about how every trial beyond the first one is a fight. And I'm really curious why they're all so confident that's how it's going to go. Have they been told? I don't feel like they've been told. Have they exactly what each round entails? Because when we go into the second round, Lindon has to ask, and he's asking that like disembodied soul that's telling him about the prize that he won. So they all seem to think that's what it's going to be, and I'm not as confident as they are. I think that they're thinking too small. This is the kind of competition that you could just do such a variety of things, and it could really get creative. And what this like universe, what they're capable of in this universe is wild and wholly unexpected sometimes. And there's like a monarch in charge who can just, they could bring people back to life, for fuck's sake. You know, like what makes y'all think that it's just going to be like that the whole time? I'm personally hopeful it's not. I want to see something that's a little bit more wild. That was like, as much as I expected one thing and got another with the first round, I wasn't mad about it or disappointed. In fact, I thought it was really interesting and a neat idea to have it start off as a series of like obstacle courses like that. If they want to do something like that, I'm, you know, absolutely here for it. It's kind of, I feel like we have to go through the first few rather quickly because you're trying to pare it down and get down to as few people as possible. And then you are able to slow down and pull back as the number of contestants is dwindling to a more manageable number. And you can spend some time with each character as they're going through whatever the trial is that they're experiencing. And, you know, I'm surprised at the simplicity of their expectations. That's all I'm saying. So, Andy says, I think they're basing their expectations based on previous tournaments. Okay, well, don't do that, guys. This is just stop. So we go into chapter 11 and Lindon is still in the middle of the first round. And what winds up happening here, because the end of the chapter or the end of the section last time and the end of chapter 10, I was congratulating him on his restraint, which it turns out was a little bit premature on my part because Lindon is underestimating his own performance. So he keeps thinking that he's like falling behind and trying to make up for lost time. But, and I think this is part of what's so smart about the way that this first round is set up, not letting the contestants have any access to the progress of their rivals or teammates. So they have no idea whether or not they are doing super well or not. Now, that said, Ethan is the exception. Ethan's doing what Charity wishes Lindon was doing. Because Ethan's literally just fucking chilling and having a fucking cocktail, getting a manicure, and not hurrying himself at all. Really trying to stay within that like 62, 65 margin. Which Charity is sort of like, man, I really thought that he had like more potential in him. What's funny is that Charity wants Lindon to be restrained, but she isn't recognizing restraint when it's actually happening in front of her. So she's frustrated that Lindon's beginning to climb up to the top 10 and wants him to be a little bit more circumspect, especially with the couple of trials that involve Dross, and it makes it really obvious, like, you know, that he has some sort of advantage. And yeah, Ethan is doing what she's wanting Lindon to do, and she's simply frustrated with Ethan and a little disappointed. And all I can wonder is when Ethan is gonna pull it out, because, and when I say it, I mean his dick, his Madra dick. What is the point where Ethan truly like unleashes and goes fucking nuts? Because he like allowed Yerin to see a bit of what he's really capable of for a moment. And that was just, I think, him trying to be like, oh, really? You want some of this smoke? No, you don't. And let me show you why not. And trying to also motivate her, trying to be like, look, I know that you're frustrated, but you could get to this point at some point, and this is within your grasp. And remind her of the value of staying and training at Underlord and not just pursuing advancement for its own sake. But when in a fight, because we've seen him do it a teeny tiny bit with the the baddies that we've seen him go up against, but he has reined it in so quickly. We haven't really gotten, for me, those people were no real challenge to him. He just it was nothing. I want to see him really be pressed a little and maybe up against multiple people and just really if you're only listening to this, some of my message is lost because I'm doing a lot of hand gestures and a lot of weaving my head around, and that just does not come across if you're not watching me. So the beginning of this, he's starting, he goes through the third and fourth trials of this obstacle course, and he comes across this creature, that has this huge weapon, and he winds up having to use, I think, the Void Dragon's Dance, if I'm not mistaken, for this one. Later on, he comes up against this thing that's looks like it multiplies into several of itself, but it's actually a series of illusions that, because of Dross, it's extremely easy to see through, almost to the point that it doesn't even register for him what is supposed to be happening. It's so ineffective. It's like somebody gives you something, some food, and it's so unrecognizable as food that you're not even clear if you're supposed to eat it or not. That kind of thing. He's just why is this happening? And Dross has to be pretend that they all look real, I guess. And that's the one that really draws everyone's attention, because he goes through that particular trial, which is supposed to be one of the more difficult and really meant to trip people up, in 8 seconds. The person in next of place is Sophie at 6.5 minutes, something like that. So it's a bit too much. That really pushes him ahead, and it's 18 seconds. My bad, not 8 seconds. Nevertheless, Charity is watching and hearing all of these people that are theorizing what advantage he has that allowed him to do this so quickly. Did he have eyes that could pierce illusions? A spiritual sense developed far behind his peers? Perhaps he had brought a divine treasure that could reveal the truth to him. That was the closest to the truth, Charity knew. His mind spirit must have held off the illusion for long enough that Lindon could destroy the real body. Now, what I think is so interesting about this is she's not exactly wrong, but she underestimates so much what exactly Dross is doing. Because what she's sort of, it seems to me, envisioning is Dross really being I'm going to hold this back so that you can see, oh, I can't hold it anymore, quick! And in fact, it's no effort at all. And we find out a little bit later that Lindon has asked her for scales a couple more times. Ballsy, just saying. And she has started to suspect that he's literally just spending them as money. Which, why would he? Y'all are giving him everything he could need. What do you think he's even spending it on, Charity? But she doesn't believe that Dross could be processing her Madra as quickly as he is. So she knows Dross exists. She knows the kinds of advantages in a very abstract sense that Dross could grant to Lindon, but she doesn't understand the full extent. It's trying to comprehend what Dross can do when Dross is really one of a kind in his way. We know that the Abaddon have their own version that's even more advanced, but in our human realm on Cradle, this is not something that I feel she's really run into. Why would she know? It's just funny because she really is she's got this idea that Lindon's revealing too much about himself. And granted, I think she's right here, but I think she just doesn't know how much there is to be revealed. So she thinks that he's shown his hand and he really hasn't. Like, this is the least of what Dross can do. And she doesn't know that. So she's getting really irritated. That made 4 things he had now revealed: his soul cloak, his dragon's breath, his hunger binding, and his mind spirit. In her estimation, her niece and nephew were performing much better. And then we get a little information about how Mercy is using like mixed techniques in order to make it difficult for people to tell exactly what it is she's doing. Had yet to reveal her Dream of Darkness technique or her bloodline armor. The armor was common knowledge, but of her command of it would not be. The only ability Mercy had fully revealed was her proficiency with striker techniques, which couldn't be helped. She was placed 7th, very respectable. Her mother was likely proud. Pride had used part of his armor, but had revealed only 2 of his 4 enforcer techniques. As a result, he'd taken a little long and fallen to 22nd place, but someone who specialized only in enforcer techniques would have problems with such flexible scenarios as these. He would redeem himself in the duels. Now, I'm just going to have a little aside here where I talk briefly about how much Pride sucks as a person and a teammate. I hate this guy. I hate him so much. Ugh. He's the worst. He is such a perfect, like, embodiment of his name that it's really uncanny. And he has the fucking nerve in the 2nd round to try and order Lindon around when he came out ahead of Pride. And clearly, I think that's part of the problem, is that Pride doesn't want to believe that Lindon is capable and better than him. So he, like, overcompensates for the fact that he came in after Lindon by just trying to throw his weight around. But it is so pathetic to watch him do it when we know he isn't working with what Lindon is. And he is so... What Lindon has, his advantage, is something that a person like Pride couldn't really appreciate because they don't know enough to know that they don't have this. So what I'm talking about is when you're an extremely privileged person, basically what I'm saying is you lack street smarts, right? Like when you are somebody who has had to get by with not a ton of power physically, or, socially, you figure out ways around, you figure out cheats and shortcuts, you learn to read other people, you learn to plan ahead a ton. Like, this is all stuff that Lindon has grown really proficient at. So no, he doesn't have like the formal combat training, but he has understanding of like the different advantages and disadvantages of certain players, the situational, like, later on there's a whole thing where they're on that island and they like run into another crew. And for some reason, Pride thinks that these people are trying to trap them into an ambush when that's so clearly like not what was happening. He doesn't read body language and doesn't understand why, when we are rivals with them, would they want to team up with us, because he doesn't think about when people are trying to at least just get to the next level of something, they'll team up with people and then they will break that alliance. That's how it works. He is just very black and white. No, there are enemies. We're not working together. They don't want to work. What are you talking about? He doesn't understand that sort of necessity, So he has this real attitude problem in this sense of wanting to, like, tell Lindon the way it is because he has very formal training, which has its value for sure. I'm not trying to act like it's nothing. But when you have to think on your feet and when you have to be flexible, which is what his main problem is, you are incapable of doing that because you've never had to worry about it before. You are at a disadvantage, serious disadvantage. He has always been able to just go at things head first. The way that the Akura family dynamic seems to be set up is basically if we have a problem, I'm going to fight you. If I win, I get my way. Well, that's all well and good. If you're fighting people, like by formally declaring that you are challenging them, and then, going into a space dedicated to a fight with witnesses, a whole like fucking official thing, is a very different scenario than just trying to scrape by and survive something that you got thrown into. And this thing that is like the whole tournament is an official thing. But within that, it's much more the kinds of scenarios that Lindon has experienced, with the stakes actually lower. Like in some ways it's higher because he wants to win, but lower because he's not going to die. And we know he's not going to die. Now, I'm saying that he's not going to die with a sort of asterisk, because I feel like that's protection might not like carry through the whole entire thing. This world can be real cruel, and I wouldn't be surprised if eventually there's like a death match of some kind, but I kind of hope not, because that feels rough. But I feel like it's the difference between somebody who's like a trained boxer or martial artist going into a tournament like this with a soldier, somebody who's actually like been on a field of battle and had to go through that shit. It's not like he doesn't bring anything to the table, but what he brings is so limited, and he doesn't understand that. So he doesn't value the things that Lindon does bring to the table. He doesn't even know that they're there. I'm saying he doesn't value them, like he recognizes that they exist at all, but I don't think he does. And that whole scene later where he just like ruins everything, and then Lindon is the one that saves his life, and he can't even acknowledge that. It's not even just that he's like refusing because he's in denial and doesn't want to admit that Lindon saved his life. I really don't believe that he thinks that is what Lindon did. I think he is so entrenched in his perception of what just happened that he truly does not believe that, which is the worst. Like, if you are digging your heels in because you're in denial, I can sort of hate you for that. If you really don't get it, I can't even be as mad at you, because it feels like I'm almost sorry for you, because you suck. You're bad at this. And I want to just be mad at him. And Lindon, like, I can't help but sympathize with the fact that Lindon kind of considers lancing him with some black flame real quick to get him out of the running, because genuinely this dude does not feel like a teammate, and he does not feel like a weapon to be taken advantage of. He feels like a liability, and that sucks. You only have 3 people like officially on your team, and one of those people has no interest in cooperating. That is a huge handicap. That sucks. So I'm getting way ahead of myself talking about that, but I just needed to talk, real quick, because yeah, he blows. So we get some talk about Safara, and this is something that comes up later because Lindon and Yerin sit and watch like basically a replay of her getting through all of the levels. And apparently she just fucking destroyed. Like, she completely pwned that whole shit, and they are both a little shook after they finish watching it. Which Charity is watching and also like concerned about it. And then she brings up Shamiara. She publicly claimed to be an underlady from a distant branch of the royal family, but Charity doubted that. Based on her level of command over Royal Madra, she suspected the girl might be the monarch's daughter. And I was just like, oh, you're so close, girl. She's using her real name, by the way. I really thought that her name would be well known enough, because her mother died when she was like, how old? I feel like she really, like, her name would have been well known enough that if they just used the same name, everybody would be aware of who she is. It's weird to me that this is like, that they have managed to keep this secret. And I'm not going to dwell on that too much, but I just find that the fact that she uses her actual name shocked me. I assumed if they're going to lie about the level that she's at, they would have to basically create a whole other identity for her, because the princess, whether or not they believe that her mother's dead and she's the queen, the princess would still be well known, I would have thought. So let's see. The only other one Charity spent time contemplating was Yerin. No fewer than 3 members of their Black Flame branch were participating in the tournament. Even if 2 were only adopted disciples, the Aurelius clan wasn't in a position to turn down any potential source of strength. So Yerin is, as usual, able to really like fight her way through some shit. But when it comes to trying to do something in another way, she can't get through it as quickly. And she acknowledges that later when they're sort of looking through her abilities. She says, unless it's a fight, I'm as useless as feathers on a fish. I love her little like turns of phrase. She's funny. There's one that has come up more than once. You're asking me, but who am I supposed to ask? Which is like, it's a weirdly clunky one, but it still works. You know, I just enjoy her. She's very provincial in a weird way. So, oh, right. And this is when she looks at Ethan Aurelius and she's just like, this is weird. He's just really not doing as well as I would have expected. And eventually when she's looking at how consistently in like the same bracket he is, it says that her eyebrow raises. And I'm starting to wonder if she's figuring out that this is all restraint and a bit of a show. It feels like she is, but we'll see. So, I pretty much like, yeah, this is when, Lindon, like, you know, finishes that one thing really quickly. And then he finishes and he shows up in 10th place and Yerin finishes almost like immediately after him. And she's really mad that he beat her, but it feels very appropriate because of the fact that she doesn't have the flexibility that he has. So, and this is sort of what was always talked about when they were discussing paths and he was looking to take a path. She was warning him that if you like pick something that only focuses on the one thing very explicitly, you can box yourself in a little. But if you try and do too many things, you're never going to be good enough at any of them. And he's really trying to walk that line, you know? And I think like, it has occurred to me a couple times that he could like try and split his core again and add another path, which, I'm not like against it. I wouldn't be mad about it, but it does start to feel like maybe it's a cheat, you know? Or if there's just got to be a limit to how much you can do that. And I kind of enjoy the dichotomy of the Black Flame, which is such destruction, and then the Pure Madra, which is such a neutral. And I don't really want to mess with that. I sort of enjoy how at odds they are. So, I don't know. I wouldn't be mad, but I don't care about it either. I'm fine with him just continuing to pursue the path that he's on and just getting better at this. Don't spread yourself too thin. That's all I'm saying. So this is when Lindon sees Shamiara on the leaderboard. She's in number 2 place. 2nd place is what humans say when they say that. And I really love Dross being like, man, if she is a monarch, she's not even winning, which is like low-key embarrassing, which is funny. I don't think that she would want to win, but I don't know because she doesn't seem to have a whole lot of restraint. I would think you wouldn't want to win so as to keep eyes off you. But Shamiara doesn't really feel like very smart about this. So maybe she's actually very annoyed that she hasn't won. And Lindon is just baffled at how a monarch could sneak in and how they wouldn't, like other monarchs could possibly be fooled. And it says he had obviously misunderstood the situation. He had to be wrong. And I am just waiting for him to mention this to anybody because I have no idea what the reaction would be if he tried to tell someone. First of all, he's just got this fucking like, oh, this basically God took me on a weird, like, soul journey and I saw her being crowned. Like, does that mean anything to anybody? Who could he tell that would take that seriously and have the power to follow it up and ask questions and would be of like a significant enough tier in society that they wouldn't be inviting danger on themselves by asking those questions? Because I feel like that's a pretty big deal to insinuate that, like, not only are they cheating, but that woman is actually your queen, your monarch. I wouldn't be surprised if that's something that a clan would be willing to murder somebody to keep quiet. So who, if he tells Charity, can she look into that? Who would she talk to? Could she tell Malice? Would Malice be able to pierce a veil that another monarch had put over their spirit? What would she, like, I'm very interested in that whole little, like, side story. So we go then to Yerin and Lindon, like, watching the performances of everybody else and trying to figure out how people are doing. Drost is a model of Safara and is like, oh, she will fucking kill you. No problem. There's not even like a 1% chance that you're getting out of this. And Lyndon's like, yeah, I would have thought that she was an overlord. I can't believe that she's on our level because she's not really. And, that's also the situation that Ethan's in, but nobody really seems to realize that. Yerin does some. I don't know if Lindon really does. So at this point, there's this thing that happens. I love this so much. She says, I've got some things I want to try. I know my path is worth more than this. My master placed 5th in the first round. She didn't sound too bothered, but Lindon could feel her disappointment. She'd let herself down in her own eyes. His brush stopped and he looked up at her. If it was about where you started, I would never have caught up to you. The only thing that matters is where you end up. He returned to the scroll. And our paths don't end with this tournament. She didn't respond for so long that he stopped worrying about his notes and started worrying that he'd said something wrong. By the time he checked her expression, she'd sat down on the couch beside him again. Her hair hung down so that he couldn't see her face, but she sat closer to him than before. I think you've offended her, Dross whispered into Lyndon's mind. Quick, throw yourself on the floor and beg forgiveness. Lindon swallowed. I don't think so, he responded. But before he could say anything to Yerin, rainbow light filled the room. Ah! Ha, ha, ha! Cock blocked! That sucks. Sorry, Lindon. Now kiss! Sucks. So, this is when they get their prizes. And they show them a castle floating in midair. As your reward for successfully passing the first round, our team of artisans, soulsmiths, and architects will design for you a floating fortress according to your preferences. What? And I know that Yerin mentioned what the prizes are. I didn't remember it being this huge a prize this early on. The castle shifted into a more luxurious housing compound surrounding a courtyard filled with trees and a shining pool. We can tailor the facilities to your style and needs and even your path. Now the house became a network of rocky hills and caves with vents in the ground spewing jets of fire into the sky. What? I can't overstate how blown away by this prize I was, you guys. It's not even real. And my mouth was still like kind of hanging open. Like this was just so beyond. And I would be lying if I didn't tell you that I 100,000% started imagining what I would do with this kind of, what I would design, what I would ask for. I actually do, for patrons of the show, I do a show called Unsober, where me and Rashawn, who's a co-host on another show, several other shows. She did Harry Potter, she did Dresden Files, or just doing Dresden Files now. We talked about dream houses on one of those Unsober episodes. and just basically threw out, like, if money were no object, the things that we would love to add to a home. And this is like that, but actually getting to interact with the things, because we see, like, later on when Ethan is building his, he's able to, like, kind of see what it would actually look like. It's like a virtual interactive, it's like he's on like an iPad building a thing with a program, you know? And I just can't, that's so fun. This is a literal fantasy situation. I just can't. Library, like, for sure, a big library with a fireplace and like one of those fainting couches and like a liquor cabinet with like gorgeous drinkware and probably a pool, obviously, but like one of those like real classy pools that looks like it's like natural. And and I would definitely have like a whole like butler's pantry for just holding like fine china and appliances and stuff. And I'd have like 2 dishwashers and 2 stoves. I would go nuts, kids, nuts. Jake says no volcano spewing black flame Madra. It doesn't fit with my path, Jake. I'm on the path of the hungry stomach. And so I do a lot of cooking. And, you know, black flame is just burns things. It doesn't cook them. It's not good. So at this point, and after they all recover from the shock of what the fucking prize is, and Lindon has to decide what he wants it to be like, he suddenly comes up with an idea. And he says, if you'll forgive another question, could we combine our prizes? Would you allow us to have one fortress that's twice the size? And I really thought that they would say no, but they were like, oh, if 11 is fine with that, then yes. And Yerin says, don't you think it's better if we have 2? Which really the question is, don't you think it's better if we each have our own? And Lindon says, we're always traveling together anyway. We can make ours better than anyone else's. She stared at him quietly for a long moment, which gave him enough time to realize what he'd said. He had essentially asked her if she wanted to build a home with him. He asked her to move in. They're taking it to the next level. He rushed to his face, and she noticed because her own cheeks flushed red, and she hurriedly looked away. He almost apologized to the Nine-Cloud soul and took back his words. He really hadn't been thinking. This could ruin his whole relationship with Yerin. Mercy's voice echoed clearly in his mind. And you're okay with that? Then his own. I don't know. Look at that, Dross said proudly. I can play memories back for you. It's just like you're hearing it for the first time, isn't it? Dross. Control yourself. So, finally, Yerin makes this weird noise. And Lindon real quickly is like, or not, if you don't want to, we can wait. And the Nine-Cloud soul is like, you know, you have to give us a definitive answer. I can ask him to leave to make sure that you're not being, like, coerced. And she finally is just like, no, get it done. Yerin looked away from Lindon, and the back of her neck was scarlet. He knew his face had to be even brighter than hers. You guys! I cannot wait to see what kind of bonkers fucking house they build. It's gonna be weird. Okay, so chapter 12. Ethan building his. He is pushing this construct's buttons in every sense. It's been apparently like 2 hours, I think, of like doing this over and over, and he's tried like 80 different versions. And finally, he's gotten the basic layout of the garden right, and he's adding the actual plants. And he sort of pushes it to see just how much value he can add because plants, each of them are worth a different sheer amount of money. I don't think that he's necessarily that concerned about like the monetary value for his own sake, but I do think he's just kind of curious and feels like, why not just get everything I can out of this? So he asks for a mela tree, and the soul says, I'm afraid we can provide only one. Ethan affected disappointment, but the joke was on the 9-clad court. He didn't actually need this tree at all. He just wanted to extract the maximum value from his prize. Since they were willing to give him one, he would use it. So he starts listing all of these different things, and he does this purposely in a way that is mixed up enough that there are things in there he apparently is really needing. We don't know what any of that is, though. There's no indication to us what his plan is for this stuff. And then there are things that aren't really super useful or just, maybe just worth money, but not actually something that he's got a plan for. And just sort of like trying to obfuscate in a way that really got me thinking, like, I would imagine you're providing this kind of prize. Do you keep a record of what every contestant asked for? Because that does feel like a hell of a fucking advantage if you designed the fortress of your enemy and you know what they've got. I feel like that's real dangerous. But we're all operating as if we're all on the same side here, but we're not necessarily. I don't know. But yeah, eventually he finishes, but the thing is like just agitated at how friggin' long he's taking. So let me go into the explanation of what the next round is. Seize the crown. There are 32 crowns scattered across the tropical island. They can be easily identified as they send up a beacon of golden light. When you place a crown on your head, you must keep it on your head for a full minute. If you succeed, you will be instantly returned back here, qualified for the third round. Be certain you're ready when you put it on, because once you place the crown on your head, there's no going back. The crown is only removed if you are killed when wearing it. Not to worry, you are still under the infallible protection of a monarch. If you die, you'll be held for 1 hour, after which you will be returned to the island. Now, I'll be honest. As soon as they said that, I wondered what I would prefer. Would I rather Lindon and Yerin and company gets through without anybody dying and being held? Or do I kind of want to see what being held for an hour is like? Because I can't lie, I'm real curious about that. Where are you held? Do you get to watch what's happening, or are you held in like a box of nothingness so that you don't, and then just dropped in with no idea what's going on? What exactly is that like? I decided I couldn't decide. So, what happens, happens. Because by the end of the chapter 13, they're still in the middle of this one. We haven't finished this particular round yet. So 32 crowns means 32 spots for round 3. And by the way, there are people who are going in without full teams because not everybody made it past the first round. So those people, if there's only one of them left, they only have to grab the one crown, but they also don't have any teammates to help defend them. It's a significant disadvantage. And I love that this soul is doing this big flowery speech, and then Northstrider just interrupts and says, "Begin." And that's just it. So this is when Pride just decides that he's going to fucking do what he do and act as if Lindon isn't even there. And it's just him and Mercy. His mother is definitely watching us, Dross noted. We'll have to be very sneaky when we stab him in the back. I really don't feel like I know enough about the monarch, about monarchs in general and their attitudes, or about Malice specifically, because my instinct is to be, oh, she'll be mad. Another part of me is will she recognize the need for that? Because she's a very practical person, it feels like. And she may, as much as it would upset her in a way, depending on the circumstance, she might feel like that was the only course of action. I don't know. But, you know, I'm acting as if that's definitely going to come to pass, and I don't know that. But I kind of feel like it might come to pass, because Pride is just not improving. He isn't learning from his mistakes. He's just doing the same stupid shit over and over again. So, okay. There's the fights here. I don't want to get into too much. I only have like 15 minutes left, and I'll just like hit on some like major points, but I don't want to get into too many like detailed descriptions of the fights, because when you get down to it, that stuff doesn't actually matter as much as the dialogue and like the strategic changes that wind up shifting around. I love this moment where Yerin is with Narusea and Athen, and Narusea gets injured by this like weird crocodile creature, and Yerin is like kind of trying to like needle Narusea a little bit, and Narusea does not rise to the bait at all and just says, "My fault, I was careless." And she feels like Yerin's like, now I don't know what to say. Could happen to anyone. Just keep an eye up. She kind of like pulls back and feels bad. Saya only nodded, taking no offense, extending her spiritual perception out into the distance. Liked her better when she had a temper, Yerin muttered. I really am super admiring of somebody who can keep that shit under control. Because Athen, he succeeds in needling her. She only has a temper to her enemies. To her allies, she is the gentlest, and her sword is between his teeth. And I think that is so great and so badass and so like very threatening. And she's not even looking at him when she does this. That's how precise she is. So good. And when she pulls it away, he says that it tastes like dust and flower petals. So at this point, when they sense somebody coming, Saya is sort of weirded out at the fact that the people that she's feeling aren't fighting. She ducked in an emerald blur, and a serpentine dragon of water punched through the leaves behind her. A pulse of pure Madra from Athen dispersed the ruler technique, leaving natural water to spray on the ground. In an instant, all three of them dropped veils and cycled their Madra. So, they are being attacked by water artists, which Narusea calls tide walkers and ghost blades. She showed no uncertainty, only determination and a little anger. Yerin liked her more with every passing second. Can I just say how much I hope that they become besties? I really love the idea of Yerin having another like super fighty friend. And Narusea, I just have been so interested in her right from the start. She just like really got my attention. Being very similar to Yerin in some ways, but having more of a temper. Yerin can be so sort of cold and distant in the way that she like views things. And we know that that's not exactly true about her personality, really. But that is the mask that she keeps on most of the time and fairly effectively. So it's fun to see somebody like Narusea who has like a similar attitude in many ways, but a very different sort of overall vibe to her. So we jump from there to this moment where fucking Pride screws shit up again. Dross is telling Lindon about this dude that they are sort of in this like stalemate with. They're facing off with this guy who has this weird orb in one hand and like a tank on his back. Dross says he's from Dreadnought City, Everwood continent, fighting for Emrys Silentborn. They do strange things with remnants over there. And, like, once Pride decides that he's going to fucking do whatever he decides to do and not back up, but go forward, this guy lets loose a remnant hand from the tank that grips Pride up. And Pride is able to defend himself, but this is a pretty cool thing. Like, Just a wild idea. A gray light covered Pride. The striker technique glanced off. His fist caught the dreadnought citizen in the forehead, and then with a black flash, the man's skull crunched. Before he collapsed, the stranger dissolved to white light and vanished to wherever the dead waited for an hour. He hadn't fully disappeared before a roar sounded from behind him. And there's his partner, Dross said with a sigh. So this woman comes forward, and she is really pissed. And all three of them take this woman down. And, let's see, an arrow split her heart a moment later and she vanished. Pride stood triumphantly over the spot where her body had disappeared, pointing at the empty space. He was driving us back into an ambush. Lindon says, "Did you not know she was there? I saw her on the way in. How is it an ambush when we're together and they're split up? They just wanted to meet up without attracting attention." Guys, I know that Pride isn't hearing him. And I know that this is not going to have the effect that Lindon wants. But Lindon getting to be like, "Did you not know that she was there already?" is such a satisfying little like petty moment. And I know it doesn't really, like I said, it doesn't do any good. But Pride is so fucking certain of himself. And Lindon getting to be like, "I saw her," even though it was really Dross that saw her. It doesn't matter. It still counts. I can't. I love it. Fuck you, Pride. I hate you. You suck. So he said, Pride says, "You almost pushed us into a trap. I saved us. You turned us into bait. How are our team supposed to get to us now?" And at this point, they are surrounded by people. And he feels like maybe 10. And they flee. And when he asks Dross, like, how many? I think at one point, Dross is just like, "Do I count you? Do I count myself?" Dross, you can be so helpful and then so unhelpful, sir. So then we go back to Yerin and this fight. Again, I'm not going to get into this too much, but I really do enjoy Athen defending while she attacks and the way that he uses his Madra. And the enemy had training of their own and greater numbers. The air shook with continuous thunder. Yerin's spiritual sense strained to keep up. Her channels burned as she quickly switched from technique to technique. And she is really going as fast as she has ever gone, and she's aware of that too. Because really, you know, this is like the first high-pressure situation she's been in since she, got through and ascended, right? Because pretty much the battle, like, in the vault was kind of over by the time she finished, I feel like. Wasn't it? And then there was the whole, the training with Athen and stuff. She felt like it wasn't really quite enough, or the stakes weren't quite high enough. So at this point, they get interrupted by a streak of golden light. And it appears to be one of these crowns that has suddenly kind of come into existence. Now, I didn't realize that's how it was going to work, that these crowns would intermittently appear. I thought that they were all there at once, waiting to be found, and you just had to figure out where they were. It was just like a treasure hunt. But evidently, they sort of flicker into being, I think. If I'm not mistaken, because it just seems like they appear very suddenly, and they're not necessarily super far away, so they would have seen them earlier had they been lit up and ready to go. So when this light appears and draws everyone's attention for a second, Athen takes advantage of that and blows pure Madra outward really hard. And at first, Yerin's sort of surprised that he would do that because it sort of neutralizes everybody as well as herself. And then she realizes that he did that as a signal. And all of a sudden, black flame just comes through the trees and all of their friends are heading toward them. And she thinks, oh, yay, you're here to save us, because she doesn't realize that they are being fucking chased. And when she tries to like be like, oh, welcome sight, Lindon grabs her hand and is like, talk later, let's go. And she throws her sense out behind her and feels how many people are on their tail and is like, oh my God. And she takes off. So there is this fight around the crown. 17 people total. And this, like, Lindon sent out a signal. We're the largest group here. We can't keep waiting for our other teams to join us. We should regroup and push for the crown. Let them know. Eventually, everybody's there except for Pride. And Dross is like, I told Pride the plan. I don't know what to do. Mercy sighed and pointed. Lindon found him between a richly dressed woman with flying swords hovering around her head and a young man in blue robes with rings of lightning crackling around his arms. I love how many varieties of weird shit this author comes up with for people to fight with. It must be so much fun for him. I wonder if he just does like Mad Libs, you know, where he's like, he's on blank path of blank and his blanks had blanks on them, and he just fills in body parts and shapes or animals or whatever. And he's like, his arms had vipers on them, path of poison something. Like that, I feel like you would just have to start hitting a wall where you run out of ideas, but it doesn't seem like he has that problem. So, everybody attacks Mercy at once. She defended herself well, taking only a cut to her leg from the knife, but their second volley finished her. This is everybody attacking the sword girl that Mercy like directs them to, not attacking Mercy. I realized just now that I said it sounded like Mercy. Which left Pride to pour Madra and Soulfire into one huge blow against the Stormcaller. The lightning artist managed to get his shield in front of him in time, so the strike launched him into the jungle, at which point he must have fled because he didn't show up again. Pride did not acknowledge them. He dove deeper into the fight. So this is when another light streaks down. And at this point, like, this is sort of a blessing, because people realizing that there's another crown that they could go for causes them to disperse. They're not all fighting over the same one right here, or the same ones, because I think there's 3 here. And Lindon asks Dross, how long since the first crowns appeared? Now, I don't feel like I remember that in the rules, but is there like a limited amount of time that they have from when a crown appears to when it disappears that they have to get it by? Because the way that he asked that question makes me feel like he thinks that there's a sort of deadline. And I didn't really remember that being mentioned. I remembered like there's a deadline when you put it on your head, that you have to keep it for a minute in order to get to really like claim it and make it to the next round. But that, like, the question about how long it's been since the first one appeared, I was surprised about. Oh, okay. Gen in the chat, I think it's Gen, says, I think he's looking for a pattern to predict when the next one will show up. Oh, cool. What a smarty pants. Look at you, Lindon. You're so good. I love this guy. See, this is the kind of thing that I want my mind to work like that and to think about trying to see a pattern. But in the heat of the moment, I don't think it would occur to me. So good on him. I mean, he does have like a memory construct to keep track of everything as well. So he's apparently like really learning to utilize that to the best advantage, which I admire and appreciate. Jake says, Alexa, set a timer. A little bit. So then we have this like moment with one of the Aurelius family that comes forward, and it says bright sparks crackled on each of her knuckles, and Lindon thought they must be the beginnings of a two-handed striker technique until they never went away. Her gold signs then. And Dross points out that she's House Aurelius. And she looks at Athan when she gets attacked by this like gust of bloody rain that hits her. When she saw Ethan, she brightened and shouted something. Once again, Lindon felt as though he almost understood, unsure whether it was another language or a thick accent. And this is mentioned earlier, that somebody speaks with a what he thinks is another language, and he realizes that he's never actually heard any other language than the one that he speaks, which is a pretty wild thought, but, you know, he hasn't been around that much. And it turns out she's asking him for help. And of course, pride landed among the blood chorus artists before Ethan reacted. He landed a black rippling punch on one, shrugged off an attack from the other. And before pride could counter it, the silver sword Madra crashed into one enemy and the black arrows ravaged the other. Ethan helped the Aurelius woman to her feet. She asked him a question and he responded in the same language. The Aurelius woman said her farewells to Ethan, cast a last regretful glance at the gold column of light, then ran off into the trees. And Lindon asks Ethan, what did she say to you? And Ethan says, well, you know, she asked me to help with the crown because I should be helping House Aurelius after the death of our monarch, but she understood and she would leave this crown to me. And Lindon is like, wait, you have never told us where you came from. And he says it with this sort of accusing tone. And Ethan's like, oh, well, I didn't know that you wanted to know since you never asked me. And Lindon realizes, oh my God, I never did ask you. Why haven't I asked you that? And at this point, they get interrupted. But I'm hopeful that we're going to get some story time later on. Here comes the moment where pride starts to pick up one of the fucking crowns, and Yerin says, I'll be dead and buried before I let you wear that, and pride says, you have quite an attitude for a servant. Hey, how about you drop dead? Just a suggestion. I thought maybe you could just drop dead real quick because I hate you. So finally, Lindon just straight up asks Pride, who do you think should get the crown? And finally he says, the one who has the best chance of making it to the end, my sister. And Lindon agrees and says we should carry this one with us until we have at least 2 more. So that your team can use them all? Ethan squinted suspiciously. The Akura family keeps their boot heel on the common man once again. Down with the oppressors. I love Ethan so much. I really do. I really do. He's so annoying, and I love him so much anyway. I don't care. So Dross at this point is trying to get Lindon's fucking attention. And Lindon keeps on being like, yeah, Dross, hold on. And I'm like, dude, when does Dross chime in this tone when he doesn't have something incredibly crucial and important to fucking tell you? Pay attention, dude. What are you doing? And at this point, they all turn and realizes that there are a bunch of dragons heading toward them. Oh, kids, this is really rough. So I really just don't have time to do this justice. Should I save this till next time? Basically, I'm going to jump ahead. I think I'll do, because there's a lot of tension trying to figure out what plan we should follow. He hadn't been able to do much research into the Black Dragon team, because it's not just the gold Sophie dragon. There's green one. I think there's red as well as the black. And one of their contestants was listed as Black Dragon prisoner. So he wondered if the Black Dragons might be forced to fight by the gold dragons, which, that's really interesting. And I'm wondering if it's maybe a person, like, could they force a person to link with them the way that, and at this point, A green blast of wind Madra caught one of the reds in the body at the same time as a wave of silver sword Madra. Pride was there so quickly it looked like Yerin's striker technique had carried him, and he slammed a foot down on the other red's skull. Neither dragon died. They roared, sending fire Madra flooding around them, but a wave of pure Madra almost instantly wiped it away. So, Lindon gets the empty palm ready and adds soul fire to both hands. He has a empty palm ready in both hands. He struck them both in the lower back. Pure Madra flooded them, disrupting their Madra channels, and they staggered forward. The woman whipped her tail at him, but without Madra enforcing it, it didn't have enough force behind it. So he gets engaged in hand-to-hand combat with them for a little while, and they're very fast. And Lindon had been most concerned about the green dragon interfering, but he was filled with black arrows. We have Narusea and Mercy interfering. Athen strolled up to Lindon's fight, casually slapping the Underlady in the face as he tripped the Underlord. They rolled to the ground, and Mercy had them bound in strings of shadow before they could even react. I can't tell you guys how disrespectful that seemed to me, tripping one and slapping the other in the face. Yikes. So this is when he sees Sephara running, and something else is barreling through the trees at them. And it blew Dragon's breath down the forest. This was a solid bar of darkness, with a few red sparks here and there. It radiated the power of destruction so strongly that the smaller pieces of debris nearby crumbled to dust and burned away in its passing. So Lindon grabs this motherfucker and uses his hunger arm to pull that pure ass black flame into his core, because other things he can't pull into his core. It'll fuck him up. But this is the exact shit that he's got in there already, and he needs it. And he uses that. It's honestly pretty badass. They glared at each other with identical eyes, neither backing down. Then the dragon was riddled with striker techniques. The rest of Lindon's team tore it to shreds. And I just honestly, that sounds so... I want to see this so bad. So this is when Sephara yells Black Flame. And, you know, she's got a tiny bit of a grudge against him. I'm sure that she wants him to lose, but also this isn't going to be enough for her because she wants him dead in real life, and it's not going to happen here. So she attacks them, and it really does take all of them to defend against her. And Lindon uses the dross in order to sort of slow things down. And at this point, he catches on that Sophie has something from Ghostwater. She had somehow managed to avoid Yerin's striker technique at the same time. And Lindon asks him, how did you not know that she had Ghostwater? And he says, my records are incomplete. Just in this very frustrated way, insinuating that he has said this shit before. She breaks Lindon's arm. And if the breaking of his arm to me just is so rude. He keeps getting his bones broken. Just let him not for once. And I'm sure that he'll be healed immediately when he wins, but he has to get through the rest of this with a broken arm, I'm assuming. I wonder if you get killed and you start over, do you get restored before you get dropped back in? Or do they just hold you for an hour with a broken arm and toss you back in with a broken arm? That's an interesting question. They had to at least, if they couldn't prevent her from reaching the third round, they had to at least stop her from eliminating them all. Lindon followed Dross's directions, reaching down with his remnant arm. From beneath a bush, he grabbed the crown. And that is the end of the chapter. And I really don't know, is he just going to give that to her to try and distract her? What is he going to try and do here? I don't know. But I'm 10 minutes over time, so I can't talk about it anymore. You guys, I'm really excited. I can't, I'm so sad though. We're getting so close to the end of this. So I'm going to go. I'm over time. Thank you again so much to Andy for commissioning this. Thank you to everybody who is here in the chat and hanging out with me. I appreciate you. We will be back tomorrow night at 6 for the next episode of coverage. So until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.